What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. Also know I'm the host and producer of over 2,000 epic conversations over the last 10 years on the Dr. Vibe show. As I like to say, I'm the host of Epic Conversations, and the Dr. Vibe Show is the place for epic conversations. Also know I'm a certified empowerment coach and president and CEO of Express Your Vibe Coaching and Communications. Man, I have that memorized. So, you know that we always like bringing new friends to the Dr. Vibe Show. We have another new friend. We just keep on bringing new people that you should know about on the Dr. Vibe Show. Our next new friend is Robin Koerner. He's a political and economic commentator for the Huffington Post, Independent Voter Network, and other outlets. He holds a graduate degree in both physics and philosophy of science from the University of Cambridge, UK. Not University of Kentucky, University of United Kingdom, not University of Kentucky, everyone. He is British born, if you can't tell after he says his first syllable, and recently became a citizen of the USA. A decade ago, he founded WatchingAmerica.com. Very important site that you should check out, because we all want to know what people outside of America are thinking about America. We all know what people are thinking about America in America. An organization of over 200 volunteers that translates and posts in English views about the USA from all over the world. Fantastic. He may be best known for having coined the term, quote, blue Republican, unquote, to refer to liberals and independents who joined the GOP to support Ron Paul's bid for the presidency in 2012, and in so doing, launching the largest coalition that ever existed for that candidate. Congratulations. Robin's current work as the author of the book, If You Can Keep It, and as a trainer and consultant, focuses on bringing people together across political divisions. We need more of Robin, especially right now, with a view to winning supporters for good causes rather than just arguments. He is driven by the conviction that more unites us as people and as Americans than divides us as partisans. And if we can find common ground and understand the forces that really divide political change, then, quote, we the people, unquote, will be able to do what the founders employed us to do, maintain our natural rights against power and its abuse. And he says, people and their well-being are the only legitimate ends of politics. You're too smart to be a politician, Robin. You just realize that? You're too smart. But
I ain't a politician.
So he is on our Epic Conversation tonight. He wrote a really good article that is so appropriate for our times. The Cure for Toxic Masculinity is Real Masculinity. Welcome to the show for the first time, but not the last time, Mr. Robin Koerner. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm good. And thanks for the invite, Dr. Vibe. I appreciate it, and it's good to meet you. Good to talk to you.
It's a pleasure is all mine. We're looking forward to another epic conversation on a topic that is so relevant these days, to peel away toxic masculinity. And what you're going to find out from our conversation tonight, Robin has got deep into this. He hasn't just conversed about it with them, asked people, especially women, about it. So you're going to get the real deal tonight. So before we get any further, we've shared some of your professional background. Can you share a bit about your personal background, where you grew up, growing up, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I do that, just let me say that the article that you found that we're going to discuss today was actually on the Foundation for Economic Education, FEE.org. And actually, my biggest platform now, which wasn't in that bio, because I think that bio came from FEE, is actually FEE, right? Yes. Foundation for Economic Education. So that's probably maybe the most important platform I have. And it was great because a lot of people saw this article and other articles on FEE. So that was good. Yeah, so I was born near the south coast of England. And I first came to the US in an attempt to stay in the US in 2004, after 6 attorneys told me there was no way I could possibly immigrate on the terms I was insisting on.
Wow.
That's a whole other conversation. And I don't like it when people tell me I can't do things. So then I definitely was going to do it. And it took me 12 years to become a citizen, but I became an American citizen about a year and a half ago. And so I'm now a proud American. I call myself a bi-patriot. I feel like a patriotic American. I did before I was a technical American. But you know, I'm still fond of Blighty, of the old country, when I go back and visit family. We're still all in the UK. So yeah, I've been very fortunate in my life, I should say. You mentioned my education at the University of Cambridge, one of the best universities in the world. I was really fortunate to get that opportunity. And I have quite an eclectic educational background, having done physics on the one hand and philosophy, specifically philosophy of science on the other hand. And I got very interested back then and since in epistemology, which is, you know, the philosophy of belief and knowledge. And in my current work, bringing people across political divisions, which you referenced in that bio, I'm using that a lot, right? We don't think enough about how we think. We don't think enough about how we form our judgments as opposed to justifying them post hoc. And so that's something I spend a lot of time thinking about and working with. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, is that a good enough background? Or
yeah, but I'm gonna get a little bit deeper on this because you left
Please
too much.
do.
You left too much stuff out. So let me ask.
Okay, fair enough.
Where did obviously education has been part of your journey, part of your core.
Yeah.
Where did the desire to pursue education so diligently come from?
You know, that's a good question. And I would say that the fundamental motivation is really a passion for truth, which sounds a cliche when I say it. But I've always been just excited to find out what's so. Actually, that is why I got into physics, right? You know what? I'll tell you a little anecdote because we've got time. I was invited to, invited. It was suggested to me by a history teacher of mine when I was 14 that I needed to read the book A Brief History of Time. And I don't know if you know that book. It was a bestseller for months and months and months. It was the book written by Stephen Hawking, arguably the greatest physicist alive today. And I was 14 years old when I read this book, and I was religious, and I had quite what I would say now maybe a simplistic faith. And I read this book, A Brief History of Time, and it was where I discovered quantum mechanics. And I discovered reading this book that here I had all these ideas about God, but my ideas about the table and its reality, the table that I was sitting at, were wrong. And I had a massive explosion of intellectual humility because I'm like, how can I go and make arguments about God and try and affect people's lives if I don't even understand the table that I can touch and see right here? So out of actually a philosophical and a theological motivation, I went off to Cambridge to study physics. And my reason for that was that I figured I could teach myself anything I needed to teach myself, except math and physics. Math and physics, you got to be taught that. And I knew that, therefore, I was going to have one opportunity to do it. And so I decided to go to arguably the best physics university in the world, certainly one of the top three, to learn what my universe is before I start kind of going meta. And I never wanted to be a physicist. It was just this kind of like deep desire to have an idea of you know, the way things are, just a pursuit for truth. But I always had this philosophical motivation. So after I did the physics degree, I then moved over into philosophy of science and all of that stuff, and more directly dealt with some of those intellectual passions that had driven me to physics in the first place. And so, you know, I've always been a seeker, like I'm sure many of the folks on your shows and maybe many of your viewers. I've always been a seeker, and I've always found that I've got particularly excited about discovering new ideas or perspectives that change so much so fast, right? Especially if they are perspectives or ideas that aren't common in my culture or among the people that I spend time with. I find that wonderfully exciting. I like to discover I'm wrong, because then, you know, the whole world opens up anew. So I think that's really my fundamental passion. And then to get to your exact question, on top of that, I'm a bit of an extrovert, and I enjoy communicating, and I love having original ideas, and then I get excited to share them. And I get excited to see sometimes the impact that my best ideas can have on others. So I've got that search for truth, a love of irreverence and originality, and sufficient extroversion that I love to, share my latest findings and go back and forth. And obviously that's not just an educational, you don't just educate others doing that. You learn a lot doing that, right? You have to test your ideas against the world and against other people in the world. So that's kind of how I got to be where I am, thinking deep thoughts, hopefully having original ideas, synthesizing ideas in original ways and sharing them. And I have a kind of rule as a writer, as an author, as a speaker, because I do quite a bit of speaking, that unless I'm saying something that at least I believe is original, unless I've got an original synthesis to present, I'll just shut up. I won't write it. Because pretty much, it's very easy to throw red meat, based on your politics, where you are culturally, your background, your ethnicity, all of these boxes that we're in. There's always a constituency for saying to people what they already believe and giving them something to get their teeth into, rah, rah. Like we see it on social media. Everybody shares, they love what they already agree with. I ain't got time for that. That doesn't change the world. That doesn't make the country better. What I want to do is reach people where they are, but give them a perspective that is new to them, but they can use it to make their lives better and hopefully maybe the country that they live in or the world that they live in better. So, but that's what turns me on. I could just write the same old articles to like my political allies, for example, and get tons of shares and make no difference to anybody. So I don't do that.
Excellent. Where did the desire come from to want to be an American? Because right now, a lot of people would not want to go to America. So where did your desires come in? And when you expressed the desire, what was the reaction of friends and family to that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, despite what the media are telling us, don't buy that people don't want to come to America anymore. It is still the shining city on the hill. And I go around the world teaching ideas of liberty, of free societies and free markets. And I meet a lot of young people all over the world. And if you're an American and you want to find a foreign friend, go to Poland, go to the Czech Republic, go to countries where what America represents still matters, because the symbol of America changed the course of their history. And maybe that's another conversation.
Yeah,
but there are still people trying to get into America more than any other country in the world, and there's a reason for that. So I know what you're getting at, but I just want to put it out there.
Sure.
Because, yeah. Now, as to my personal choice, I originally came to America chasing a woman. Why else? And I was in my 20s at the time, and that didn't work out.
Yep.
But I fell in love with America, and I discovered being in America, I felt very American, actually, even as a Brit, because I'm quite outgoing and open. Americans tend to be very open. They're very friendly. And I know these are all cliches and generalizations, but there's a lot of truth in them. But really importantly, I come from a country where we don't much like success. If you're successful, you don't talk about it because it's not good manners. America is a country where you celebrate success, your own and other people's. And it is true. And I've talked to a lot of immigrants about this, including from the first world, from developed countries like Britain, where we could have had a perfectly good life, we would have done just fine, right? But even coming from countries like Britain, you come to America and it still is the land of opportunity in so many ways. People will judge you based on what you can do. There is an acceptance that means that, you've got a big ballroom to play in. You can just come to America, you can have the idea and you can try it out. And people like that here. And I like being in a country where folks are open and friendly and aren't hiding success. Also, I came to America and I got interested in the founding ideas, which ironically were mostly born, I mean, not completely, with hats off to, say, Native Americans and other influences in this continent of North America. But the ideas on which America is based. The more time I spent here, the more I realized they're Anglo. They come from the islands where I was born in, where we've lost most of those ideas. We've forgotten even the vocabulary of freedom. I have on my wall the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence. That stuff was exciting to me. And I got here, I started exploring that, and I was like, this turns me on. This is in the culture here, and that's a culture that I could operate in. And so it has been.
Excellent. Before we get into it, and we are going to have another conversation, because you've landed a number of conversation pieces that I know my audience would like to get you to expand on. What do you remember the feeling when it finally became a reality, becoming American? Where were you? How did you find out? And what was your reaction?
All right. I became American in 2 stages. Look, I knew I was American the first time. I came in my 20s, and I kind of felt it. And, and then all the attorneys told me I couldn't get in on my terms, and I battled for 12 years. And then obviously there's the citizenship ceremony at the end, which is the real moment. But there were 2 moments during that 12-year journey where I knew that I was no longer just a Brit, and that I was an American in my soul. The first one, when I discovered I was no longer just a Brit, I had just got my green card, and there was a conference going on in the Sheraton Hotel in Phoenix, where I was living at the time. And I had just got interested in politics, because I was never interested in politics until about 2010, 11. And so I was kind of new and excited by some of these, these ideas of liberty that America was founded on. I was reading a lot. Anyway, there was a political conference in Phoenix, and with a friend, I went to this, crept into the back of this big hall at the Sheraton, and these people were speaking, some of them quite well known. And a lot of folks in the room were carrying firearms. And for the first time in my life, I was in a room with people with firearms, and I didn't freak out. I understood why they had them. And I was like, and I noticed that I just saw these folks carrying weapons. And as a Brit, carrying a weapon is an anathema to me. It's a cultural anathema. But in that room at that time, I was just comfortable, and it was just okay to me. And it was a small moment. But if you put any other Brit in a room where a bunch of people are just, sporting a sidearm for no particular reason, most Brits would go, what the hell, these crazy Americans? But I didn't, because I'd been here for long enough to understand why those people were doing it. I didn't own a sidearm, I didn't own a firearm myself, but I got it. I got the place of that thing in the culture. And so that was the first moment. That was the moment when I knew I wasn't just a Brit anymore. The moment I knew I was an American, and I may cry telling you this, I was up a mountain 50 or 70 miles out of Bishkek, the capital of Kyrgyzstan. And I was up a mountain on a retreat to teach some young Kyrgyz and Russians some of the ideas on which our society is founded. And I was teaching for a non-profit that invited me to do this. It was a week-long retreat with some amazing, amazing young adults. And in one of the classes in this retreat, one of the other teachers, who is an opera singer, got the students in the class to sing the Kyrgyz national anthem. And one of the students wrote it in Kyrgyz, and we wrote an English translation of this anthem. And, you know, like so many national anthems, it has so many of the same themes, right? Of freedom, of the beauty of the land, of the history, of, you know, all of these things. And there was the Kyrgyz anthem. And then my friend, the opera singer, said, thank you to the students for sharing this part of their identity. And now he would like to share his country's national anthem. He's American. Now, at this point, I had my green card, but I was nowhere near my citizenship. And so he got up at the front of this class, up a mountain in Kyrgyzstan, and sang the Star-Spangled Banner. And I was sitting at the front of the class, and I just started crying. And I didn't know what to do with myself. And I wasn't even American. And I thought, wow, this must mean a lot to me. Like, it moved me so much. Now, by that time, I'd done a lot of reading about, you know, what America was and what the ideas were that were being fought for, you know, when that poem that became the Star-Spangled Banner was written. So I was very moved. And then I was like, well, I must be American then, because I've never cried at God Save the Queen, but I cried. I cried for the American anthem that day. You know, there was obviously a lot going on. I mean, I think a lot of it was because of the hell that I was put through in the immigration system, which is another conversation.
Sure.
You know, I had to put a lot into becoming American. I had to fight for it. And because that may have been the first time I'd heard the anthem after I actually got the green card, which was the hard bit. So maybe there was, you know, I might have probably full of latent emotion. But that was it. So they were the two stages. One was I wasn't a Brit anymore, and the next was I'm an American now. And then, of course, a few years later, the citizenship. And that's a big deal. And that day I felt like I was marrying a country.
Excellent. Okay. Well, let's get to this epic conversation. The cure for toxic masculinity is the real What made you write this article at this interesting time in regards to masculinity?
Well, that's a great question. A few years ago, I wrote an article that in some ways was maybe one of the most provocative articles I've ever written. It certainly had the most provocative title. And the title was What Women Want. And as a man, writing an article with that title on the Huffington Post is a little provocative. And I wrote that article back then because I had discovered that I hadn't been told what I needed to know as a young man dealing in a world of women. And I had discovered by the time I got to my 30s that, and having traveled the world a lot, that's an important bit. I've spent a lot of time in other continents, especially in Asia. So I had another reference point with respect to this topic. That in the West, we have something of a problem with gender per se, with actually being gendered. It's like in the West, we are human first, second, and third, and maybe fourth or fifth or sixth. You can be gendered. You can be a man or a woman. Now, in other parts of the world, to be human is to be a man or to be a woman, right? The distinctions aren't there. And it seemed to me that in my experience as I've got older, I've discovered that relationships aren't always well served, well, they usually are not well served, by the politicization of something that's got a biological basis. And specifically, talking to women, having relationships with women, it seems to me that both sexes are not entirely happy because each one doesn't seem to be very good at helping the other experience whatever sex they are. Women want to experience themselves and celebrate themselves as women, and I'm generalizing, and men likewise. And one of the things that makes it possible enables it to be so is the polarity between the masculine and the feminine. So I was brought up as a Generation Xer with, you know, no means no, always hands off in every way. And I don't just mean physically, I mean kind of psychologically, emotionally, because you would never chase a woman, because if you're chasing, by definition, that means they're running away, which means that the very act would be predatory. So you shouldn't do that, right? So, you know, it was like this very ineffective kind of approach to gender that I think I had been brought up with. And so moving, and I had found that, and I talked about this in that earlier article, What Women Want, when I made a decision to start talking to women as women, kind of overtly as women, signifying to them that I am comfortable in my gender, I am comfortable in my masculinity. What's more, I enjoy my masculinity. What's more, I'm going to create a safe conversational space for them to flaunt their femininity and enjoy their femininity. And let's play together. Let's indulge a little bit in this aspect of our humanity. There doesn't have to be anything predatory about it, negative about it, even loaded about it. Just a recognition that, you know, whereas children have toys, adults have sexuality and gender, and it can be part of our experience. And I think culturally in the West, for many political reasons, we've kind of forgotten that. And it's almost like a pendulum has swung too far. It's almost like, yeah, I mean, look, first and second wave feminism, we have so much to thank that for. Huge advances have been made. But, you know, again, taking politics into the bedroom at its most extreme, but even into personal relationships, can be problematic. And I feel that as I started trying these ideas out, and women felt safe to talk to me about this explicitly, they were like, yes, yes, tell more men this. We want our men to be men. You know, we want them to enable us, to help us, give us the space to feel like women and be women. We want to play with this too. And it was almost like women feel like they have to train men in their masculinity, which is absurd, right? Because if masculinity is real, then it should be innate to some extent. Now, obviously, I'm generalizing. Obviously, we're all on a spectrum, and obviously there are overlaps in all areas of personality traits and characteristics between the genders. And obviously, some men are more masculine and some are less masculine in some dimensions than others. I grant all of that, of course. But we've made a lot of political headway by concentrating elsewhere, by concentrating on ways in which we are the same and should enable us to express our sameness as different genders. And in relationships, that's not serving a lot of people. That's what I started to experience as I went through adulthood. And then we get we get the Me Too phenomenon now. I'm moving forward a few years, so this is now last year. We get the Me Too phenomenon and these horrific stories about, you know, the ill treatment of human beings by other human beings, specifically, mostly, when it comes to Me Too, the ill treatment of women by men. Now, I should also say that between those two, between the article that we're talking about and the What Women Want article, there's also been another problem that I've paid attention to and written a little bit about, which is that we have abused the language when it comes to things, notions of victimhood and predation. We've not only have we told men, not taught men how they're different from women and can create a safe and wonderful space for women to experience themselves as feminine as women, but now we've got this the California, the campus consent in California, laws passed for that, affirmative consent. We have told men that they can't engage with women in any kind of sexual milieu in the natural way. And we've laden it with all these artifices that are completely ignore human nature in so many ways. And it's like, well, this is ridiculous. And we've started with a very broad brush, painting actual predators the same as men who are clumsy, men who just, may be rude, but aren't doing violence. So now there's all of that. And then we get Me Too. So I'm like, well, we've got a big mess here, because we have men being abusive to women, and I'll get back to that, because it is abusive. But the nature of the abuse, it's not extreme masculinity. It's not masculinity at all. It's just bad manners. Time after time, it's bad manners. It's aggressive often. It's rude. But as someone who has a good upbringing, I don't think, oh, that guy's being a little over-the-top flirting when I hear these stories. I'm thinking, what the hell is that? What's wrong with these men? How insecure? How pathetic? How, in other words, unmasculine do they have to be? That that's how they're going to try and get their kicks from women that maybe they have a professional relationship with, or maybe that they just meet in the street or at a coffee shop. And I'm thinking, all the while we're looking at the ill treatment of women by men and trying to put that at the feet of masculinity itself, which the term toxic masculinity does, right? We are making everything even worse. We're making it harder for men to be men. We're making it harder for men to find a healthy masculinity, to celebrate their masculinity, so that they can be the pole to the feminine that enables women to celebrate their femininity. And so I wanted to draw the distinction and say, basically, this thing that's toxic, it's not masculinity at all. It's just bloody bad manners. It's the opposite of masculinity, because the sacred masculine, if you want to call it that, the true masculine, I would say, is respectful. It's assertive but respectful. It's confident, but it's also receptive and engaged and interested. It's empathic. It's not crude. It doesn't ignore the impact it's having on the people that it communicates with. Don't call that toxic masculinity. Call that toxic lack of masculinity, if anything. So I just wanted to say these stories are not about masculinity at all. They're about absolutely unacceptable bad manners. So why don't we start with bringing up human beings to treat each other well? And if they're not treating each other well, then they may be rude, they may be bad-mannered in various domains. But the problem isn't with the domain. The problem is with their bad manners. So let's not think this is a masculinity problem. Gender is just a place. It's just a domain where a lot of this extremely bad upbringing and this extreme insecurity of men who don't know how to behave any better is evident. But it's not about masculinity. It's about men who haven't been brought up properly and are insecure and are, in as much as they're insecure, anything but masculine. And so that article is trying to bring all these things together, which is to say, no, we need more gender polarity, because we need men to better understand who they are and who women are, so that they can treat women in a way that respects them more, that gives them the space to be themselves more, that enables them to trust men more. You can't bring up a man to know how to deal effectively with a woman unless you say to a boy, women are the same as you in these ways, but they're a bit different in these ways. And as soon as you say a bit different in these ways, as soon as you even go there, you're admitting a polarity, you're admitting the difference. And I'm saying, let's start telling the truth about masculinity and femininity. Let's have the positive models of those things, so that you're not just telling boys masculinity is bad. You're saying, boys, be this kind of a man. This is a good kind of a man. This is what you do instead. Those urges, those ways you relate to yourself and your gender and your sexuality, they're all true. They're all there. We're not going to deny them, but express it this way, then they've got something positive to replace this so-called toxic masculinity, which isn't masculinity at all, with. That's where I'm coming from.
Okay. One of the people that is watching live is Dr. Cami J. Anderson, a regular supporter of the Dr. Vibe Show. And I don't know if we may have to do a part 2 of this already, but she has 2 questions. Her first question is, how do you listen without mansplaining the experiences of women? And the second question is, how do you position yourself so you stay objective when discussing gender and not reductive of the women's experience?
Well, first of all, let's be clear. There's no such thing as objective. I mean, there is. I mean, 2 + 2 = 4. There is such a thing as objectivity. But as human beings, as finite human beings living in this world, we can only increasingly approach it. And I believe my search for truth and my love of truth is indeed kind of a lifelong attempt to approach it more closely, this idea of objectivity. One thing I do, and I start the article with this, is I make a point of talking to those with a different perspective and a different experiential context from my own. And in this case, that meant talking to a lot of women. And it was shocking to me. And we need to talk about this. And this is kind of what really got me to sit down and I've got to write this article. I choose to make my friends polite, decent, competent, accomplished men. I therefore was shocked to discover the proportion of women who had stories to tell me about what I would say, being on the end of bad manners, crudeness, certainly a kind of form of verbal and emotional aggression, just in the last month or two. Because in my experience of men, I would not have guessed that it's really that for women, they have to navigate that degree of male incompetence. And incompetence is the thing, right? And rudeness. So I was shocked. I learned something I didn't know. So one of the answers to the question is go looking to falsify what you already know. Be scientific about your politics and your cultural understanding. Scientific in the sense of science advances not by trying to confirm what it already knows, but by declaring that it doesn't yet have the truth, and as efficiently as possible trying to find where it is wrong. That is intellectual humility. Science advances by intellectual humility. When it comes to politics and culture, most people, we love what we already believe, and it's all about confirmation bias. But you've got to consciously, this is a direct answer to the question, you've got to consciously be aware of your confirmation bias and then go and try and destroy it. Right? You've got to go out to destroy it. Also, I don't buy that, I'm very uneasy about terms like mansplaining. I mean, it's a kind of a chauvinistically loaded term, like toxic masculinity. Because, yes, as I did in the title of the article, you can posit a toxic you can talk about masculinity that's toxic without saying that all masculinity is toxic, that masculinity is inherently toxic. But a term like toxic masculinity is in danger of implying that, and then it just gets accepted by all people who are using the term to have a discussion about the issue. Similarly, mansplaining. It's a way, these kind of terms, they are either morally or intellectually condescending, and they're a way to shut down an argument. And, I will say that, I've given an example just now. There are aspects of maleness and masculinity and men that women can know better than I do as a man because they are on the receiving end, right? Similarly, if you are a straight male and you therefore have intimate relationships with women, there may be things about women that all things being equal, better than most women. It works both ways, right? At least in a certain context. Because all of us, and it also is about intellectual humility again, and this has been, tested in all kinds of disciplines, empirical psychology, behavioral economics. We all believe things, even about ourselves and our own preferences, that are false. What we think we want and what our actions actually tell the truth about what we want are not the same thing. So I actually think that, men don't have a monopoly on truth about men any more or less than women have a monopoly on truth about women. In a way, the entire point of this article is to say, let's actually have a cross-gender discussion about who we are, and let's allow ourselves to use the terms that each of us, everybody in the discussion, feels apply without being shut down just because for some other of us, we've got a political ideology that we're pushing, or that we decide that what somebody's saying is politically loaded, even though for them it may not be. I think I've answered the question.
Yeah.
Have I answered the question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So delving deeper in this article, you ask a very interesting question that I want you to answer. What has happened to men? What has happened to a lot of men, in your opinion? Yeah.
So when I look back at what I was not taught, and I think I said as a young man, in a way, I wasn't taught anything that matters about gender and gender relations. I got the no means no bit. I had great parents who brought me up to be polite. So obviously I was not going to be doing any harm. I hope certainly not physically, and I hope not emotionally or psychologically, to any woman that I would be my friend, let alone would be an intimate, someone I'd be intimate with. So I had that bit right, but nobody actually told me no means no. That's a first order truth. But many things that you are going to say to a woman as a man, the impact and even the meaning will be context dependent. Nobody said to me that there are many things that are important in a relationship with a woman that you can only do and say or even be once you have established a context of trust and respect. And once that context is established, there are things that work, that are good, that are strengthening, that are lifting, that before you've established that context might be none of those things. They might actually be harmful, which kind of goes to the point of what all these men are doing wrong, of course, that triggered the Me Too movement. Nobody explained that to me. Nobody said that, that things that you might want, that might get you off as a man, the exact equivalent wouldn't get a woman off as a woman. And I use the example, the most basic, crudest example, the most concrete example I could come up with, that I put in the article of that, which was also based on conversations that I've had with women who've had this happen to them, is that the number of women that have men on dating apps send them pics of their genitalia. I've not met you, but I'll send you a pic of my genitalia. And I'm just like, oh my God, how just pathetic. And not just how pathetic, but how stupid as a man do you have to be to do that? Even if you wanted to do that, if you wanted something like whatever it is that you're trying to get out of a woman by doing that, you would think that after you've tried it a few times, you might go, this really isn't working for me, right? But no, there's all of these stupid men, and there are women on the receiving end of that. Now, most men, look at the porn industry, would actually probably, let's put it this way, they wouldn't be upset if a woman they found attractive did the equivalent the other way. Now, obviously, men and women are made very differently, right? Now, that's a basic and crude and obvious example. And you might say, well, yeah, it's too banal an example to even be worth talking about. But clearly it isn't, because there are millions and millions of men out there, a large minority, that are doing things like that to women on dating apps. And I'm sure that's not unrelated to the fact that we have Weinstein and Cosby and Louis C.K. and all of these guys, right? Yeah, those things have to be related in some way, right? And I'm just like, well, my God, what would stop me from doing that is nothing to do with what I want out of a woman. I'm a red-blooded male, right? Or, whether my sexuality is healthy or not. What would stop me doing that is I wouldn't treat anybody like that. It's extremely bad manners. The slightest bit of empathy would be enough to stop you doing that, I would think. Unless, of course, you are in a very different context where you have that kind of intimacy established and those kind of things have a completely different meaning. Nobody taught me any of that. And okay, you don't expect to be taught that out of a book or in a classroom, but you might expect in a healthy culture that you would get that. You'd get it by osmosis. And my experience of living in Asia, I would say, you do get a lot of that by osmosis. Now, in a lot of Asian cultures, they have different problems with respect to gender. I'm not saying panacea, right? But I'm aware of the difference.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, this disappointment in men, were you, I guess when you did your research, informal research of with women,
yeah,
how shocked were you to hear the stories that you were hearing? Was it a reinforcer or was it a total surprise?
No, I was shocked by the sheer number of men who are stupid, or I should say strictly proportion of men who are stupid and rude enough to behave like that to women. And obviously it makes sense because that I wouldn't know and that the women would, because that entire part of a straight male human experience, i.e. the sexual part, is going to be directed only at women and not at men. And I think that sexuality and gender polarity is a bigger part of our experience as human beings than I think our culture is comfortable admitting to. And I think we should indulge it. I think we should celebrate it. I think it should be a glorious dance, that goes through our lives. I think that, and I've talked to actual psychotherapists about this, that a lot of people who have relationship problems that cause them to go to a therapist, maybe to save their marriage, that kind of a thing, it is often because of a collapse of that gender polarity. And that collapse often is driven by political ideas. But there was there was an article in the New York Times supplement some years ago about it. There was a wonderful line in there that I think I might have quoted. I quoted in one of my articles that I've written about. That the things that cause us to the things that cause us to protest in the daytime are not the things that get us hot in the nighttime. And and I just think that we need to be able to have that conversation, right? So to back up, I am someone that celebrates that difference and thinks that we're underplaying it. Yet, as a culture, when I see what women who experience that part of masculinity that I as a man will never experience, because I'm straight, I was shocked. I was just shocked. And I was also shocked because if I look at the men I have in my life and have ever had in my life, I have never seen them, almost to a man, behave with that kind of bad manners and lack of empathy that seems to be so prevalent in the lives of so many young women. Well, not just young women, women. So yeah, I was shocked because that's not my experience of men.
What do you feel this behavior by some men is having, the effect it's having on boys? So this goes to one of my motivations for the article. If
the only thing that has the label men and masculinity is that, if the only time we talk about men and masculinity is when we're talking about Weinstein and Cosby, etc., then that's devastating for boys, because there's no positive model. There's only the vacuum, which is why I was saying earlier, we've got to preempt it by talking about a celebratory, a positive, maybe even a heroic masculinity, an aspirational masculinity. So they already have a standard of that thing, a reference point by which they can reject this kind of, quote, toxic, unquote, masculinity that seems to be talked about more in the media, in our culture, especially right now.
Wow.
And by the way, actually, I'm just had another thought on that.
No problem.
You know Jordan Peterson, right?
Yes.
So that the phenomenon of Jordan Peterson and what he's represents in our culture is fascinating to me. He has talked quite a lot and is increasingly talking about the fact that the work that he's doing, which I think is in a very deep sense related to what I'm talking about in this way. The work that he's doing is about telling the truth about what's in our nature and what isn't. Telling the truth about what we have control over of human beings and what we don't. And therefore, what we are responsible for, what taking responsibility for our lives and interactions actually means, what choices we actually have to make. Now, he's taking that into North American culture right now, and he's getting a lot of attention from young men. And he says 80% of his audiences are young men. But his is a message of, tidy your room, right? His is a message of take responsibility. His is a message of, okay, you have rights, but you also have duties and responsibilities that go with that. So earn it, earn your rights, earn your privileges, right? Now, this is quite it's not an easygoing kind of a message. He's saying to men in a certain way, I'm putting this in quotes, be a man. And the men are responding to it. Now, he didn't formulate his message towards men, but it's obviously men that are feeling this vacuum. Because when a figure like Jordan Peterson is modeling something of, could I say, of spiritual substance, they feel it innately. And it's not because they're religious. It's not because they knew they had a vacuum. It's because they have a vacuum, and when they see it getting filled, or they feel it getting filled, they feel it, and they feel different. And we're built to want to aspire. We're built to want to do better. And we have a choice. We can either throw our hands up and say, we're crap and we're victims and whatever it is and we're awful or whatever, or we can say, what, that may be true to some extent. But what we focus on, we make bigger. So let's focus on being better. Let's focus on being the best versions of ourselves, and let's admit that that means being the best versions of, the highest versions of men and masculinity. I'm not just saying all our identity is in our gender. Of course not. We need to be the best versions maybe of being American, maybe the best versions of being a father, maybe the best versions of being, a tennis player, if that's the thing, right? Whatever is in your life, whatever roles you play, whatever groups you participate in and contribute to. But being gendered is a large part of what we are. And men don't have, let's just be clear also. There are so many ways in which men have been, as a group, and I hate identitarian politics, but we're talking about masculinity, so I'm going to, this is the shorthand, right? We've been in decline educationally. We've been, might say we've been in decline spiritually by virtue of the kind of reaction that folks like Jordan Peterson, people with messages like his, are getting. There are movements like men going their own way, right? The men's rights movement. That's, a reaction to fathers who you know, they're paying for children that aren't theirs because they've been lied to, perhaps. And then they divorce the woman that might have lied to them about that child. And then they're still having to pay for that child that isn't theirs when the woman marries another man. You know, there are all of these kind of things. And to even say that would situate me in a political box for many people. But it shouldn't. It's like, that's not fair. That's not right. You know, let's, you know, and as a group, men are feeling a little bit put down by that now, right? And I think also men are reacting to, and I think I do mention third wave feminism in my article. Not only in this realm, it happens in all realms, but if somebody with a particular viewpoint tells you something that clashes with your experience, you go the other way. And I think a lot of men are a little bored of being told about this patriarchy that seems to result in more, you know, male suicides, you know, and you know, poorer educational outcomes for boys. You know, and not just that, actual emotional and physical outcomes for boys who are being, you know, medicated and diagnosed with certain things based on standards that are quite questionable. I mean, some people are saying that we're applying standards to young boys they're failing to meet, not because there's anything, not actually because there's anything wrong with those boys, but because we have kind of written out of our understanding of people, of children, what being a boy and being a girl actually mean and how they are different temperamentally in terms of, you know, traits and character, personality, distributions of personality traits, etc., etc. So I think there's a lot of men looking at that and going, you know, I don't feel like I'm part of this patriarchy sitting on this, you know, the top of this tree and having it all easy. You know, and so, yeah, it's, I can't even remember the question.
That's okay. No worries.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the audience the definition of masculinity that you put. And I think it's a very interesting one. I'm going to follow it up. So your definition is that would enable those aspects of men that are gendered, sexual, and desirous to be integrated into the highest versions of who they are, rather than denied or pathologized, only to be expressed in distorted ways that can indeed reasonably be called, quote, toxic, unquote. So built on that definition, do you feel there is a lack of men calling out other men when they're not adhering to this definition?
Okay, so first of all, I'm not saying that's a definition of masculinity. If anything, it might be kind of a bit like a definition of the problem. Okay. Right?
Okay.
Of this kind of denial of the possibility of a positive masculinity. Right. Really, if anything, maybe that's what I'm defining there. Yes, and I am having increasingly conversations with men who, like me, are going through this, like I should say, going through this realization that, wow, actually women want to be women and they want their men to be really comfortable in their masculinity. They want their men to be assertive, respectful, and polite, and trustworthy, but assertive males. And I have found that discovery has made my life so much better. It made my life better, especially in the intimate context, but also just in general, even in my professional life. And it's made my ability to make the women happy in my life happier too. So I find that when I talk about exactly this to both men and women, they light up. It's like, yeah, it's like switching the light on.
Right.
And it's, you know, men, you see, the thing is, when you see men like Weinstein do what he does and it's sexually loaded, we see the sexual nature of it and the desire that motivates it. And so we pathologize all of that. We go, oh, that's dangerous. no, it's not dangerous. It's misused in the case of Weinstein, right? Now, like anything of utility, it can be dangerous when it's misused, right? Like a knife, right? Very useful, right? You don't want to throw the knives out. You don't want to destroy all knives because they can be used to do harm. But to pathologize knives would be insane, right? But it's kind of the same logic. And I'm just saying, look, let's just put things in the right boxes. And when I talk to men and women who have ventured to consider this and to try out a more confident way of enjoying their gender polarity, I find it makes them all happy. Women actually, that is an interesting one. Okay, let's go to this. Let's hone in on this. Again, for a first approximation, male sexuality is about desire. Female sexuality, and I know this is a crass generalization, but female sexuality is much more about being desired. Now, there's a polarity right there. Now, we can wave our hands and say, well, we're socialized into that, that itself is an expression of the patriarchy. You could. I don't think that's true. But even if it were true, the fact is, in our world today, in this culture, if you're a man that can healthily, respectfully, but assertively express your desire as a man for a woman, or maybe not even that, not even in an intimate context, but your appreciation of the feminine in a non-intimate context, then guess what? The women around you will enjoy themselves a lot more. That's what I've experienced. That's what a lot of men that I've talked to about this have experienced. And most importantly, it's what a lot of women that I've spoken to have experienced. It's like I actually feel, as I've had these conversations, that a lot of women feel that their relationships are poor more than men feel that their relationships are poor. That so many women feel that there's something missing that in a way relates to the ability of a man to step up and be that. Now, I'm not saying there's some kind of male archetype. I'm not saying I don't have a definition. I mean, we talked about this earlier. In the first part of my answer to this, I don't have a single definition of masculinity, but I know, and I don't think all women have a single definition of masculinity or all have the same ideal man, but they want a man to be careful, comfortable in his skin and specifically in his male skin. That seems to work better in relationships, and according to the psychotherapist I've actually spoken to about this polarity is foundational in healthy, long-lasting relationships.
Nice.
And why wouldn't it be? Because we are, whatever questions we may have about, especially now, gender and non-gendered and whether gender is binary or not, all of those things allowed, the fact is there are two sexes, XX and XY. It's built into our nature, so we've got to be able to talk about what's so. We just have to be able to talk about what's so. And be what we are.
As we start winding down our conversation, as near the end of the article, you stress the importance of holding the feminine and the truly masculine sacred. What does that look like in your world, holding those two things truly sacred?
I don't think that I've come up with the perfect view of perfect masculinity or femininity. What I mean by that is if there is any morality at all, if there is any empathy at all, if there's any mutual respect at all, if any part of our existence is about being love and loving others, then let's be honest about the ways our gender and the ways in which we experience our gender can serve that. Let's not ignore that, because then we're missing a lot of our capacity to live our highest versions of ourselves and help others do that. And let's certainly not corrupt that by only declaring that masculinity or even gender itself is somehow an imperfect notion morally or politically, somehow inherently problematic. Something that's, I guess so, something that's sacred. If something's sacred, it's not, or if something can be held sacred, then it can't be inherently morally corrupt. Neither masculinity nor femininity is inherently morally corrupt. And it's not even logically consistent to hold out the possibility. It would be like saying the colors blue and red are morally corrupt. You know, that's the problem. We've got to get back to our felt experience and honest conversations about it, where we remember that offense is never given, it's always taken. Because these same women in my life, some of whom have had these, you know, nasty things happen to them that appall me, you know, that I call bad manners, you know, best. These are also the same women that want satisfying, intimate relationships in which they want to experience themselves fully as human beings and as women, in the context provided for them to do that by men who are experiencing their higher selves as human beings and men, and enjoying the dance that can only exist when you have the two poles. An instrument, you can't make music on an instrument that has two strings that play the same note. They have to play different notes, and then you can make music. And gender is a polarity, a difference that allows us as men and women to together make more than the sum of our parts when we come together in any kind of relationship.
I think that's a great way to end our conversation. I just want to know if you have any more messages, especially for men when it comes to this, because I feel that this article is for everybody. But I think specifically because you were so concerned about the behavior of some men, do you have any final words you'd like to share with men in general, and maybe those men who are not showing the best of masculinity? Because we don't want to use toxic masculinity as bad behavior.
No, absolutely. No, I hear you. Yeah. So I actually want to, the article simply calls out rudeness as what it is and calls it the opposite of masculinity. I call it pathetic. And in a way, I want to say to those men engaged in it, you're not getting any points with us men either. It ain't cool, right? You don't look bigger to us. There are men who can get whatever it was Weinstein was after, right? You know what I mean? In a healthy, respectful way, where it isn't zero sum, where it raises the man and the woman. And if you're not doing that, you ain't a man. You're what you have to be when you don't know how to be a man, and that's all you got left. So for those men, I would say that. And to other men like me, who I hold to be, respectful in my treatment, not only of women, but of all human beings I meet, that's what I try and do, I would say, keep an eye out more. Engage with, you might want to do what I did. You might want to engage with women in your life in a way that makes them safe to share with you their experiences about this, because you're going to learn something. You'll learn something about men and women, and it may make you a little more open to what you need to do in the way you respond to other men who aren't being their highest selves, especially in their treatment of women.
Would you include to that those type of men calling out the men that are showing this bad behavior? Because I don't know if I'm hearing enough of that.
So that's exactly what I meant there.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, yeah, I mean, like I called them out at the beginning, and what I'm saying is to those who don't need calling out, go talk to the women, because when you talk to women about their recent experiences, you will be more attuned to call out yourself.
Right.
Because to call it out, you need to see it. Now, we don't often see it. I don't. I'm not the receiving end on the receiving end of heterosexual male rudeness, because they're not directing it at me.
Right.
But we do need to be more aware. And again, I just want to be absolutely clear that I'm not saying this as someone who's kind of been, I'm not a third wave feminist. I am still a guy who believes we need more masculinity. Right. We should celebrate our maleness. Right. That men are on the receiving end of some very negative things in our culture. I don't think we have this third wave feminist patriarchy. I don't believe in that. But even as that guy, I learned something. And what I learned on the surface, you might say, on the surface might make me more of a feminist. But no, it made me more passionate about the need for men to be men and declare themselves as such.
Excellent. Well, I think it's a great way to end another epic conversation. Robin, I'd like to say thank you so much for taking time out of your positive, productive schedule to share with us on the Dr. Vibe Show. Another epic conversation. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
So my website is robinkoerner.com. That's ROBINKOERNER.com. You can follow me on Twitter at RKOERNER. And this article is on my website, but I mean, where it got most traffic was on FEE, where I'm a faculty member at FEE, Foundation for Economic Education, FEET.org. Probably the best ways.
Excellent. Well, would like to thank Robin for taking the time. We have to have him back, because our earlier part of our conversation, that's a whole other conversation piece. That is a whole, and we definitely have to ask him back for that. It's Dr. Vibe here. I'm host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of epic conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations. If you'd like to watch replays of epic conversations like this on YouTube, you're at the place. If you want to hear replays of my audio conversations, the full ones are available at Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher Radio, Google Play Music Store. You can also hear selected replays of my audio conversations at thegoodmenproject.com and also WJMSradio.com. You also should know that I am a brand ambassador for the only online magazine featuring African Americans in food, wine, and travel. The name of the magazine is Cuisine Noir Magazine. The website address is cuisinenoirmag.com. I'm also a president and CEO of Express Your Vibe Coaching and Communications. If you'd like a complimentary 30-minute empowerment session, please touch base with me via Twitter at drvibeshow. You can also email me at dr.vibe@drvibeshow.com. I also provide a service called Getting Media Coverage, where I help businesses and entrepreneurs with media promotion so they can elevate their business. And finally, you can listen to me live every Friday morning at 7:25 Eastern Time in the morning on Philadelphia won the Super Bowl, but Pennsylvania's only publicly owned Black talk radio station, WURD Word. They on AM, FM, and also via their app on the Google Play Store and also at the App Store. And that is it. So like I always say at the end of conversations, first of all, live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Also, finally, sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. So thank you so much for listening. God bless. Peace be well. Keep the faith. And as I always like to say now these days, walk good. Bye-bye.